Welcome to the Shapiro Law Firm Presents, a Facebook and YouTube live event. Today we are having a Q&A discussion on naturalization. I am attorney Schaefer. Joining me is we are having a Q&A discussion on naturalization. There we go. That's the YouTube to monitor the chat. And joining me is attorney Aaron Shapiro, my co-host. And we'll give people a couple of minutes to join while I get these banners up and going here. There's our contact. Where's my banners? Naturalization. Okay. So as we wait for people to join, I'm going to give our obligatory disclaimer. Nothing that we say here today constitutes formation of an attorney-client relationship. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. We'll be monitoring the Facebook and YouTube and the chats. So if you have your questions, send them along. But we will try to answer whatever we can. Hi, Finley. Thank you for joining us today. But we are available for hire, of course, and our contact information will be continuously scrolling at the bottom of the screen, and you feel free to reach out to us after this. So today we are discussing the very exciting topic of naturalization, and we think that it is a great topic considering we just had our election. So anyone who just became a U.S. citizen this year, they got to vote in their first election, which is pretty cool.
I was thinking that this is a very timely discussion.
Well, we were going to have it last week, but I pushed it back because we didn't think we'd have a conclusion to the election by now. Oh, is that Charmaine? How you doing?
I don't think we do have a conclusion to the election.
Well, right, but it's more of a conclusion than we had last Thursday. Oh, big complicated immigration question. All right, well, we will do our best to answer that. Shoot. While you get your question typed up, we'll start going through. Hi to you too. We will start going through the eligibility requirements. Oh, we got another question. I paid my daughter who is in Morocco to get an American passport, but it was rejected.
Wait, what?
What?
Paid what?
America. Now we have pushed it. I'm confused by that question.
What is it?
Do you see the question?
No, I can't see anything.
Oh, are you on the Facebook?
Oh, here we go. Comments. State what? I paid my daughter. Push it to Rowland.
Where's in America? All right. That is a long, complicated question. I'm not really sure. It looks like we're cut off here. Looks like there's some type of expedite request. Aaron's gonna focus on the question right now.
Peace be on you, please.
Oh, there's more. Oh, here we go. Oh, there we go. I didn't know I could do that. I'm not really understanding.
Oh, I think that basically it sounds like someone needed to apply for a naturalization, but they didn't have enough years here in order to be eligible for the naturalization. Well, so because of that, then he's not going to become a naturalized citizen. He wants to file an I-130 for his daughter, but it's going to take a long time because it's going to be a preference relative. The answer is no. You have to complete your 5 years to be eligible in order to seek to apply for a naturalization.
And actually, I was about to get to our eligibility requirements. Apply for naturalization. The first is age. It's a simple one. You have to be 18 years of age or older. And then this will go to the next one. Then you need a continuous residency. Oh, I forgot to put the one about, I forgot a banner for LPR amount of time. So you have to be a permanent resident for a certain amount of time. I think that's what that question was getting at. Basically, you need to, so there's 3 different time periods that can apply. The longest time period that you have to be a green card holder is 5 years. That's the most common. That means that you've had either a conditional and a permanent green card, or just a permanent green card for 5 years. If you were granted asylum, you only need to be a permanent resident for 4 years, because your first year as an asylee counts towards that 5-year requirement. So technically, it's 5 years, 1 as an asylee, 4 as a permanent resident. And then the only category where you can get your citizenship within 3 years is for spouses of U.S. citizens who are still married and still living with their U.S. citizen at the time of application. And this also applies for anyone who has gotten their citizenship through VAWA, not citizenship, I'm sorry, their permanent residence through VAWA, or filed an abuse waiver with the I-751 petition to remove conditions on residency. So if you're an abused spouse, you do not have to wait the full 5 years as you would have if you were married to a green card holder, got your green card through any other way. So yes, there's no way to expedite that requirement or get around that requirement, unfortunately. But okay, I'm just making sure I wasn't missing anything over there. Okay, the next requirement is continuous residency. And this, you have to be in the 5, so there's, again, we always are looking at this with 2 time periods. You have the 3-year time period and the 5-year time period. So you need to be continuously residing in the U.S. for at least 5 years if you're applying under that category, and 3 years if you're the spouse of a U.S. citizen. On top of continuous residency, we have physical presence. And this physical presence is measured the time right before you file the application. So if you're applying based on 5 years, you have to be physically present in the U.S. for at least 30 months in the last 5 years. If you're applying based on the 3 years, you have to be physically present in the U.S. for at least 18 months in the last 3 years. And there are some people that we've had this issue with. I went to a naturalization interview with someone where we actually had to take out the passports and show the stamps. I mean, immigration has your travel, but her number was pretty close. So we had to make sure it was clear that she did qualify. And there's a lot of people that will apply for reentry permits so that they could stay outside the U.S. for more than 6 months and not lose their green card. And that's perfectly fine, but it will break your continuous residency requirement, and it will also take longer with the physical presence, for if you're interested in applying for naturalization. That's the downside of being outside the U.S. Now we're getting into some more exciting things here. Good moral character. Aaron, what is good moral character?
Good moral character. It's hard to define.
Oh, we got some comments here.
It's something that is used, I believe, for them to deny things if you have bad moral character. Like if you get arrested, but maybe you don't get convicted. Or if... Or
it could be a conviction that 5-year or 3-year period.
Yeah.
But can you naturalize after 3 years of married to a U.S. citizen the entire 3 years, but you didn't get your LPR status through the marriage? No, it has to be in the category. Hashi, that's a good question. I'm pretty sure it has to be an IR6 category, but I don't think we've ever had that.
No, no one has that.
We've never had that.
I'll take a look, but I don't think so. I think the reason is because the first 2 years of the marriage case, remember, if you're married more than 2 years, you get a 3-year, and then you can apply to naturalize, right? So the first 2 years are considered like that.
Interesting question. Hashi, I wonder where you thought of that question.
You know what's even more interesting?
What?
in order for you to have the 3-year green card, you must have been married for 2 years before that in order to have not needed a 751.
Right.
So what that means is they're considering that time when you were here probably out of status towards time to naturalize.
Well, you have to have a green card.
You don't have to have status in order to get a green card through a marriage. And then if you're married for 2 years before you get your green card, which happens, then you only need 3 years to naturalize. So they're like 3 years plus 2 years of the marriage period, but you might not even be in legal status during that 2 years. It's kind of interesting.
I thought you had to have an IR6.
I'm just going to take a look online on the.
I'm confused too. Yeah, Aaron, check it out. I've never had that. I'm trying to think.
But I just think it's very interesting what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Well, while you look at that, let's see what Michael's asking. Hi, good night. Good night. My case online said case ready to be scheduled for interview. Well, I'll tell you what, Michael, you could probably blame COVID for this, why you haven't received your interview date yet. They have reopened the offices. I don't know where your case is. In New York, they started resuming interviews again a month ago. But I mean, you probably should have had yours resumed by now. You're going to want to contact USCIS, give them a call, give them, or do case status online. If you still have trouble, you can contact us and we can help you out. But I wouldn't be too worried yet because COVID kind of screwed everything up and makes everything take longer. But it is now almost a year, so that's surprising.
Wow.
Yeah, that is surprising. I would definitely want to reach out to them if you haven't already. You can contact us. Our contact information is at the bottom of the screen if you want to hire us to help you with that, because it sounds like they put your case in that pile they forget about sometimes.
I found Hashi's thing is very interesting, and I have a feeling you took a look at this. When you take a look at the USCIS Naturalization Eligibility Worksheet for 3 years to 5 years, question 1 is, I am married to and living with a U.S. citizen. True. Question 2, I've been married to that U.S. citizen for at least 3 years. True. My spouse has been a U.S. citizen for the past 3 years. During the past 3 years, I've not been out of the country for 18 months or more. If you answer true, go to the next one. So this next thing. So
it sounds like it doesn't have to be an
well, hold on.
Well, you keep reading. We're going to get you that.
I think so. That's interesting.
Right? All right. Well, let's keep going.
I like it, Hashi.
Yeah, Hashi. We learned something. We learn something new every day.
And yes, I think as long as we would look up the regulation.
Yeah, we would.
But
check everything.
As long as you are eligible, you should definitely do it.
Oh yeah. So we're on good moral character, as we said. So with good moral character, they're looking at the period immediately before filing. So again, if you're applying based on 5 years, it's that 5-year period before filing, and 3 years. If it's based on the 3 years, it's 3-year period, and it goes all the way through your interview. It goes all the way through your oath of allegiance. We've had clients go to the interview, pass the interview. They're waiting for their oath ceremony, and then they get arrested, and that kills it. So you have to continue to be a person of good moral character, and we're going to give some examples of what that is. So now, during the statutory period, there are certain things that, like if you're on probation, for example, if you don't complete probation, you can't naturalize. So there are certain things that will bar you, and you have to wait to file. There are other things that will not bar you in particular, but will make you look like you have bad moral character, and so you might want to wait to file. Now, if you go outside the statutory period, so let's say you have like a criminal conviction from 20 years ago, and if you watched any of my notable approvals this week, I talked about, I think this was yesterday, I talked about a case. We had a client, remember the guy who had like all these convictions in like the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Yeah.
And he was really worried about filing. And it actually went really smoothly. We had to get all the certificates of disposition, of course, but they were very old convictions. He ended up almost losing his green card. He was put in removal proceedings, got cancellation of removal. And so when he applied for naturalization, we had everything there. We were honest, and he was approved right away. So that was nice. But let's say you murdered somebody 20 years ago. You're not naturalizing ever. It's a permanent bar. So there are certain things that are permanent. Murder is one of them. Aggravated felonies. Aaron, would you like to tell everybody what an aggravated felony is?
Mm-hmm. No. I'm just looking up the thing for Hashi. Hold on. Okay,
Aaron, we'll focus on that, Hashi. So an aggravated felony is not defined in the immigration law or anywhere else. It's one of those terms in immigration that we don't like. But basically, if you commit, they concern things that are really serious crimes, such as murder. I'm blanking on them, like larceny over a certain amount of money, anything with violence, like force, burglary or robbery, things of that nature. Those are the type of crimes that if you have a green card, there's a good chance you're going to lose your green card. And if you haven't lost your green card, then you do not apply for naturalization, because then you will lose it. Then they'll put you in removal proceedings and try to deport you no matter when the crime was committed. Could have been 50 years ago. Other things such as persecution. If you ever persecuted someone, severely limited someone's freedom of religion, were a Nazi, I think, genocide or torture. Those are types of things that will permanently bar you from showing you have good moral character, which means you can't naturalize. And that is regardless of when you did the acts. During the statutory period, there are certain conditional bars that will stop you, that if you came to us and said, I have one or more CMITs, which is a crime involving moral turpitude. And Aaron, would you like to tell everybody what a crime involving moral turpitude is?
No, you go ahead. You can do it. And Hashi, you can naturalize.
Oh, hallelujah. Thank you, Hashi, for that insightful question. Before I tell everybody what the exciting world of CMITs, let's see what this
CIMT, crime involving moral turpitude.
We got another question here. I've been in this discussion years ago. It's a bad and applied for an established person died in the course of medicine. That's a long question.
It's an easy answer. No.
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, no.
You're good. You should seek to naturalize.
What? Oh, Hashi is, yeah. Oh, Hashi, we found your answer in the regulations, and the answer is you do not have to have gotten your green card based on marriage in that case to naturalize in 3 years. If you've been married, you have to be married for at least 3 years, though, right?
Yeah. To
the U.S. citizen.
And that person has to have been a citizen for at least 3 years.
Right. And obviously still living with the person. So, yeah, Finley, that is a long, complicated question. You were right. The answer is simple. We're talking about naturalization today, so we won't get into it too much. But your problem really happened when no, he came as a K-1 and didn't get married. That's it.
Yeah, but the real problem is that he has a removal order now.
Well, the removal order doesn't help.
No, that's the end. Because if you have a removal order, the only person who can help you is if you were to get the judge to reopen the case, or the BIA if you appealed it. But other than that, USCIS doesn't have jurisdiction over anything. Yeah,
that's the problem. Mm-hmm. Okay, so a crime involving moral turpitude. That is basically that can be many different things. It depends on the state. It could be under federal law, but basically it's things that like go against what society says is like decent and okay. things like stealing, things like I don't think drug offenses are. Prostitution. Those things have their own categories too. Help me out here, Aaron. Trespassing, is that one?
For what?
Crime involving moral turpitude.
Theoretically, if you argue it enough, it could be. It's something that could offend the.
Yeah.
Like offend people. Like it's a very complicated, silly definition.
Yeah.
Like morally repugnant.
Morally, that's a good one. Yes.
Think maybe is the word. I don't know. Reprehensible. It's depraved or immoral or a violation of the basic duties owed to a fellow man.
That's why I say trespassing actually does fall under that. Like
if
assault.
It's reckless. If it's negligent, no.
Assault can be drunk driving.
Oh yeah.
Things of that nature, but it's not a straightforward answer by any means. It's that and aggravated felonies are some of the most complicated parts of immigration law. So you really want to make sure before you decide to take a guilty plea to anything that your criminal lawyer is well versed in the immigration law, or you contact an immigration lawyer, because once the conviction or plea is entered, it is entered. And I will get into a little bit about what a conviction is for immigration offenses and when a pardon or an expungement or things like that will excuse it, which the answer is it's very rare and in very few situations. So you want to make sure you're doing the right thing if you can before there's a conviction and before there's a plea. That's very, very important. And with the CMIT, there's one petty offense exception. So it has to be one or more, and you get one little exception. So a petty offense, it's a crime where the sentence is less than a year. What's the other part of that? I always forget this one. Aaron, you know the petty offenses.
Yeah.
But basically,
if the sentence imposed was 6 months or less, the maximum sentence does not exceed 1 year.
So the problem with petty offenses is, like, if you're in a state like New York, where a misdemeanor is up to a year is the maximum sentence that can be imposed.
They changed it. It used to be up to and including. So it used to be an issue. It's not anymore.
It isn't? Since when?
Last year.
New York changed it. I was like, the immigration law didn't change.
No, okay. New York changed it. Most states have the misdemeanors less than a year.
Yeah. But if you're in a state where it still equals a year, then you don't get the petty offense exception.
Mm-hmm.
Then a controlled substance offense is also a CMIT. Again, CIMT. That's what I'm saying. CIMT. There's one exception. If you have one arrest or one conviction for marijuana possession, if it was less than 30 grams. If you have two arrests of marijuana possession of less than 30 grams, you have a CIMT.
Oh, you know, it's important to make a note on that point. A lot of times when you have a marijuana conviction, they will not put the details of what they actually have. So if you get caught with like one joint or one little baggie, they'll just put like possession of marijuana. So as a result, you need to make sure that the prosecution puts down some details about the marijuana if you have it, and if that's an issue, just so that later on in your immigration, you'll say, oh, look, it was one joint and that's all it was. So then there's no issue about the grams. Yeah,
because it's on you to prove that you qualify for the exception, not on the government. And Finley had another question. If he can, so Finley, you can't naturalize if you're not a permanent resident. So that's the first aspect of this. And in answer to your question before, you're not going to be able to become a permanent resident because of the removal order. You're talking about something about cancellation of removal, and the only way that's going to happen is if your case in immigration court is reopened, and that's not an easy thing to do, unfortunately. And I mean, we can order your file, review it, and see, but most likely, it's gonna. If it could work, it would be a very big uphill battle. Put it that way. That's the the most positive way I could say that. 2 or more DUIs, that's all, again, a CIMT. Adultery, we've had people being accused of polygamy before, but never adultery. And any unlawful acts. So you don't actually have to have been arrested, but if you admit to certain unlawful acts, they could, the government could say, well, we don't want you to naturalize, and now you have to wait until you're outside the statutory period. And they can look at things like your other law-abiding behavior. Like if you don't pay your taxes, you're probably not going to get your naturalization application approved. And there is a question about that on the taxes, and you do have to actually show your taxes at the interview to prove that you pay them. And then they look at things like compliance if you're on probation, things if you or ever been on probation, things of that nature. And that's really what we're talking about when we're saying good moral character. And if you are denied because of good moral character, and it's based on a conditional reason, not a permanent bar reason, then you can reapply again after the statutory period passes. If you have any other questions about good moral character, that's a lot in that topic. We kind of went through that quickly because it gets really specific. And like I said, when you start dealing with the crime stuff, it gets a lot, real complicated. And so we don't want to dive into that too much and bore you to death here, because we're going to get to this topic, which is a very exciting topic of the civics and English test. That is another requirement. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule. Basically, if you're over a certain age and been residing in the U.S. for a certain period of time, it's like 55, 60, 65, and then like 30 years, 20 years, 15 years, or something, somewhere around there. We've never had a client actually qualify for one of those exceptions. But I'll tell you exactly what you need to know about these two tests. For the English test, the officer's going to say 3 sentences, and you have to write it down. You write down all 3 sentences correctly, you pass that part. Then you're asked to read 3 sentences in English. You read through all 3 sentences, you're done with the English test. The civics test, that one's a little harder. The civics test is civics and history. You're going to be given 10 questions. You have to answer 6 of the 10 correctly. They do have plenty of practice materials and whatnot, but they're basic questions about our government and our way of life. So, like, name one right that the First Amendment gives you, Aaron?
Speech.
Speech is one. Religion would be also an acceptable answer. Name one of the 3 branches of government?
Executive.
That is a branch. I would also accept judicial and legislative. They actually do ask this, who's the governor of New York?
Cuomo.
They want you to know, that's correct. They want you to know your elected officials. Some harder questions. What is the war? Who was an Axis power in World War II?
Who was it, Amanda?
Germany. Yeah.
Do they ask that? I've never heard them ask that.
I've seen it as a written question in the practice. I don't know if I've had it asked.
Yeah, normally they're like, name one state that borders Canada, one that borders Mexico.
What's the cause of the Civil War? One cause.
Slavery.
Slavery. Yes, that one they ask a lot. So you can practice, and they have free practice tests and stuff. If you study, you're going to be fine. We have had people fail it, but you get a second chance with the English as well. You get 2 tries. If you fail both times, you can reapply and try again. Thank you, Farah. We're glad that you find the information helpful. So if you have any other questions about the type of questions you're asked during the civics portion of the interview, please let us know. In addition to those requirements, there's a couple. You have to take the oath of allegiance, of course. That will happen after the interview. You have to attend an interview. And if you're a man between the age of 18 and 26, then you have to prove that you registered with the Selective Service, or if you're older than that, I forgot, it's up to a certain age, you have to show a piece of paper that you registered. And the selective service is, for draft purposes, which when's the last time they had a draft? Vietnam? That was.
You have to make it legal in order to do it.
Right. So if you're a male between those ages, you have to register, but I wouldn't worry about a draft coming along. So you got to be ready to take up arms for the country. That's the idea. So next we have evidence requirements. Evidence requirements are actually not too bad in comparison with other immigration benefits that you apply for. When you first file the application, there's very little that we submit with the application, as opposed to everything else. How many times I told clients today, I can't send out your application until I have all the evidence. You can't bring it, you can't give it in late. There's no other time. With naturalization, it's a little different. You need a copy of the front and back of your green card, of course, 2 passport photos, any arrest at any point in your life, you need a certificate of disposition. And if you are married or divorced, you need to have those documents, even if you didn't get your green card through marriage. And you will bring those originals, of course, to the interview with you. At the interview, you're going to bring your taxes. You especially need to make sure you have your taxes. If you've ever failed to pay your taxes or you owe any money, they want to see those installment plans. If you don't show them that you have the installment plan, you're going to get denied for good moral character purposes in all likelihood. And then they can ask for proof of residence. I've had this happen once or twice where like the client, because they don't want you saying you have to live in that jurisdiction for 3 months before filing. So they don't want you like, oh, I heard that in Missouri, it's only taking a month to get your citizenship. So I'm going to pretend I live in Missouri for 3 months and apply. You can't do that. So they don't want you, fishing around for the best place to apply. It has to be where you live. So we've had one client where he was moving back and forth and he had previously got denied for like some criminal, like statutory reason, where he was, and then he moved back to New York. And then when he was eligible again, we applied, and they actually did ask him to prove his residency, because when he went to the interview, he didn't change over his license back to New York yet. So he shows them a license from a different state. They want him to prove it. He did. He got his citizenship, but it is a requirement to keep in mind. And then what was the other thing I was going to say? If you are applying based on the 3 years of being married and living with your U.S. citizen spouse soon, then you need to prove that you are still married and living with your U.S. citizen spouse. As opposed to your marriage interviews, your spouse will not be joining you in the interview. They're welcome to of course, accompany you, but they will want to see things like your joint leaves, bank accounts, joint taxes, things like that. You don't have to go nuts. So most likely you had your I-751 approved not too long ago. You've already produced all those. It's just kind of a continuation of that. But it's definitely, if you don't bring any of it, you're going to get a request for evidence, and it's going to delay things. So you want to make sure you have all of that. I didn't make it back. I kind of messed up the banners today, guys. I apologize, but I have acquisition of citizenship next, and we're talking about our N600s. And these are for people that are automatically become citizens. In order to automatically become a citizen, you need to be a child under 18 years old. You have to be a permanent resident and residing in the U.S. And you need to be in the legal and physical custody of a U.S. citizen parent. And then you apply. You're automatically a citizen when you turn 18, but you need to prove it. You need a certificate of citizenship. So you have to prove those things to get your certificate of citizenship. Otherwise, if you have your green card, you would have to naturalize. So you can naturalize if you can't prove those other things. And it gets complicated on what it means to be in legal and physical custody of a parent, depending on when you were born. We actually had, remember the guy who was detained, and we thought he was a citizen at first, but he was like born in a year where it said that there was something about the what's it called? It was the custody issue. Like his father, he didn't even like know the father, but because the father didn't like sign off on it, there wasn't like a divorce or a separation agreement. There was no custody arrangement, even though the parents weren't together. And because of that, it was when he was born. So the thing with the acquisition of citizenship, you have to actually look at the year you were born and what law was in place then. And then sometimes you have to go look at your country's laws on custody, and it gets pretty complicated. But if you think you're a U.S. citizen, definitely contact us. We will know. We'll help you out there. We've had people come in that were like worried about filing for naturalization for one reason or another, and we looked at their stuff and we said, guess what? You're a citizen. And they got their certificate of citizenship. So that, when those moments happen, those are very nice.
The other thing to think about is if you're at the time when you're ready to renew your green card, there's no reason to generally, just to naturalize. The fact is you can lose a green card. It's extraordinarily difficult to lose citizenship.
Well, we are going to get into, we can get into it now, about when you don't want to file for naturalization, and this kind of goes under
certain crimes. I mean, basically, if you're living under a certain crime that would violate your green card anyway if you got caught. So renewing your green card is not a great option either, is it?
Well, the only thing they do a background check, but they don't ask about criminal history on the form.
Yeah.
So it is possible to renew the green card without having a problem, but they will know when you naturalize, and you will get denied and you will get put in removal proceedings. That is one of the #1 ways people with green cards get put in removal proceedings. We've seen it happen so many times. So if you have any criminal history before you apply for naturalization, you should check with an immigration lawyer to make sure that you're not going to have that problem. It's just, and again, I was talking earlier.
It's just exactly the same thing. You can get put into proceedings if you renew a green card when they do your prints, just like you said.
You can, I know, but we've had people with criminal history get the green cards renewed.
Yeah, well, it's a mistake. Or if their crimes are not, necessarily absolute bars, we'll say. Right.
Because remember, it's also looking at different things. You don't have to prove good moral character to keep your green card to renew it.
Yeah, but if you have an aggravated felony or a CIMT within 5 years of receiving a green card, or like 2 deportable crimes at any time, drug crimes, sex crimes, DV, domestic violence, firearms, fraud.
And speaking of, we wanted to kind of explain a little bit about what a conviction is for immigration purposes. It's a formal judgment of guilt, either entered by the court or pursuant to a plea agreement. It also includes what people know as like a no-lo plea, where you're not actually found guilty, but you're sentenced as if you pled guilty or found guilty. So you're not admitting any fault. And you don't even have to have any type of conviction if you admitted sufficient facts to warrant a finding of guilt. And that we've never had anyone actually come in with that, but there is a question on the form that says, have you ever committed a crime you weren't arrested for? I've never had anyone say yes, but technically speaking, if you have, that could be a problem. And then it would be, and then I think there is one more issue, or a judge ordered some form of punishment. Oh yeah, or if you have any type of restraint on your liberty, even if you didn't have to plead guilty or weren't found guilty. So this would go along the lines of some type of like deferred adjudication that had some type of restraint on your freedom. So if you are in some type of pretrial diversion program or intervention program, as long as you don't admit any guilt, that's not a conviction. Juvenile convictions are not considered convictions for immigration purposes, But if you're a juvenile tried as an adult, that is considered a conviction. Foreign convictions can be a conviction as well if it is under the U.S. law considered a conviction for immigration purposes. Aaron, what happens if you have a criminal conviction and then you get pardoned? How does that affect your immigration status?
I think it depends on the type of pardon, right?
Well, there's two aspects. If it's in the statutory period, so in that 3 or 5 year period we talked about.
Of course, if you're looking back at that, but
right. But even if it's outside, so if it's in the statutory period that you get the pardon, there has to be extenuating or exonerating circumstances in order for you to still establish your good moral character. If it's outside the statutory period, you actually still have to show that you've reformed or rehabilitated yourself prior to the start of the statutory period. So just because you got a pardon, it does not mean that you can act like it didn't happen. Not by law.
But for basically, as long as you wait past the statutory time period, if it's a full and unconditional pardon, state or federal, then it will completely eliminate the ground for deportation or removal if you have LPR status.
Right.
But if you don't have LPR status when you committed the crime, totally different story.
Well, yeah.
Because then, despite the pardon, you still committed the crime. You still did the act, and you're likely going to be inadmissible.
Right. Right. But we're only
You're not getting into that. That's a little too much of a tangent.
Foreign pardons, I learned today because I've never been asked, do not eliminate the conviction for.
What's a foreign pardon?
If you committed a crime abroad.
Oh, outside the United States. Okay.
Outside the United States, yes. What about expungement? What if you get your records expunged?
I don't think that counts. We don't have that here. I don't know. What is that?
Expungement. Actually, they did with those marijuana offenses recently. It doesn't remove.
They changed the law. They did it retroactive, but we don't have.
Unfortunately, it doesn't remove the underlying conviction for immigration purposes. I talked about probation earlier, but very simply, if you're still on probation during that statutory
period, expungement doesn't do the trick.
No, I know it doesn't.
No. Pardon does, and we have gotten pardons.
Oh yeah, we've got
one on my wall in my office.
Pardons will do the trick, and then you wait. And then you still have to show, I mean, in order to get a pardon, you have to show that you've rehabilitated yourself. So usually if you can get the pardon, by the time you get the pardon, by the time like the statutory period's over, you shouldn't have a hard time. But when I talked about the evidence requirements earlier, and I said they're pretty lax, you're going to want to make sure you have that evidence, and you're going to want to submit that, because you're going to have to submit the proof that you completed probation when you file your application. And it's a good idea at that point to also submit proof of your rehabilitation, whatever it is that you've done. And everyone who's watching, thank you for staying with us. If you do have questions, please feel free to ask. We're here to help. What to expect at the interview? I kind of talked about this a little bit with the civics and English tests, but I like to give everybody a quick walkthrough of what to expect, because I know people are pretty nervous, and I've gone, and Aaron too, we've gone to so many of these. I could, tell you pretty much step by step what's going to happen. So you're going to get called in. They're going to probably ask for your green card, you'll bring your passport too, any other photo IDs that you have, like a driver's license. They usually have you do the fingerprints. I will just say right now, things are a little different with COVID. So we're going to pretend we're in a non-COVID world for a second, because I'm not sure if the order's different, because everything I've done now recently, I've been on the phone, because you are allowed to have an attorney with you if you want. And then the officer will ask if there's any changes on the application. They might at that point ask for, the marriage certificate, if you're married, or divorced, if you're divorced, things of that nature, any originals. And then they're going to just kind of go through the application and, ask you your name. Where do you live? Where have you lived? Where do you work? Are you married? Do you have children? Have you traveled outside the US? Like literally going through page by page of your application and asking you all the questions. If they haven't done so already, you'll then have the civics test and the English test. And at the end, you're either going to be told, congratulations. I have had clients, depending on which office, who do naturalize that day because they're able to take the oath that day. In New York City, usually not. That was in Newark, I think, the last time I had that happen. But it depends where you are and what the line is like. Although I'm sure today there's a line because of COVID. And that, or they're going to say, we need more evidence. So they'll give you a nice request for evidence. And usually you have like 30 days. I've seen this a lot with criminal convictions, because you give the certificates of disposition and sometimes they want you to then get the sentencing report or the indictment or like the arrest report. So they didn't used to ask for that. More recently, they started asking for that more. So then if you don't submit those things in the time period, they will deny it. Or they'll
deny it. It's not the end of the world.
It depends what it's denied for, because you could be placed in removal proceedings.
If they deny because you didn't get the documents back.
Oh, yeah. That's not correct. I agree. And then, or they're going to say like a decision cannot be made at this time. It has to go to supervisory review. That happens whenever there's anything that's not perfect. And by not perfect, I mean, if you've ever been arrested, if you've ever not paid your taxes, if you were
the details of a crime or details of arrest.
Crime. If your green card was based on marriage, even if you waited 5 years, but you're no longer married, or if you walk in there and say, this happened to a client, said, oh, I have a new wife now.
Yeah.
And say, okay, well, let me see your divorce. And he shows them what he thinks is a divorce. And go, this isn't a divorce. Like, this is an affidavit of plaintiff, and the guy wasn't divorced. And, now they're saying there's polygamy here and he committed a crime. And good news for this client. That was a notable approval if you want to go back.
Crime, I didn't have any meant.
There has to be the intent. But he did get a citizenship eventually. We did prove to them he really had a reasonable, objective, subjective belief that he was divorced. So, but it wasn't easy. We had to really prove everything. Oh, looks like another comment. If here we go. USCIS wanted to call you for a second interview, would they wait a year to do that? Oh, I know what you're asking. Not that they wait a year, is that I like to explain it this way to people. And this is actually the way a USCIS officer once explained it to me. When you go in for your interview, at the end, there are two piles. One pile is for applications that they can make a decision on. The other one is the pile where they're not sure. If you get put into the pile where they're not sure, you may end up waiting a while, because sometimes that pile gets put in a drawer and they forget about it. That's the government for you. That's the bureaucracy. It's terrible that they know that, and that's kind of like a known thing, but you got to pester them. I mean, that's somebody asked earlier. He was in line for an interview since December of 2019. Again, in a non-COVID world, that's not normal. Even so, I know we've had clients scheduled since then, but it's not that they're trying to make your life miserable by making you wait. It's just that they have so many people lined up, and COVID really did mess up. Because if you're talking about an interview for a marriage interview, for a second marriage interview, then that means doing a Stokes interview. And that's when they separate you, ask you both the same questions, then bring you back together and to go over anything that you guys didn't answer the same. Those interviews, I've sat in those interviews for 4 hours at a time. They're much longer than the first interview. So the line is much longer that you're going to be waiting on. But I've also had people wait a year after the first interview and then get approved. Sometimes you just get put in the pile, and it's not that you're definitely getting interviewed in that other pile. It might just be the supervisor needs to look at it, and the supervisor says, no, we'll approve it. So what they do at USCIS internally is always a question that, it's a mystery. It really is. I try to get hints whenever I can When I talk to USCIS officers, that's how I knew the pile thing. But for the most part, they don't tell you too much because their internal workings, honestly don't even think they know half the time.
I think it's changed all the time.
Yeah, it does actually.
They can take as much time as they need, I think, but they need to be reasonably processing it.
Another thing I've learned also, which could be why people waiting for marriage interviews are waited longer this year, when there's an election year, they prioritize naturalizations because there's the belief that if you naturalize under a certain president, you're going to want to reelect him. So this year, especially because they had to reschedule those naturalizations, that they were focusing on that. So they'll shift to naturalization, which means the adjustment of status interviews will pile up, and then they'll go back. That's the most I kind of know about the internal workings, that they go back and forth like that. And it does change, like, who knows? So options after denial. We talked a little bit about this, how you can refile. That's obviously one of the options. Another option is filing. It's technically called a rehearing on your naturalization, or it's like an appeal. You're basically saying they made the wrong decision. We've done this where a client was given a request for evidence after the interview, and we had mailed it to them. We had proof of the mailing, and they said they never got it. And when you're deciding whether to do the N336 or just refile, there are plenty of things to take into consideration there. Timing. N336s we've had take well over a year before, and the wait time for your naturalization interview may be much shorter. And I will also say, when we talk about wait time, it goes up and down. Like, there are people that clients for like a 2-month period are only waiting 4 months for an interview, and then all of a sudden shoots up to a year. And again, that has to do with the internal workings, but it's not like a concern. You're welcome, LeeCharm. So whether or not you want to appeal it or refile it is a good question. But the thing you want to make sure that you're avoiding, of course, is removal proceedings. Again, I can't stress this enough. If you have any reason to believe that you may be placed in removal proceedings, generally has to deal with a criminal conviction. Do not apply for naturalization until you talk to an immigration lawyer who understands the criminal consequences of your guilty or of your conviction or guilty plea. So really, you have two options: N336, which is essentially an appeal, or refile. I put this on because this was interesting. When I was preparing our outline today, I came across this section in the USCIS policy manual. And I don't know why, but I was always under the impression you could not be a dual national, or you could be, but it was like hush hush. Apparently, there's no problem. You can be a dual national. And you don't have to give up your American citizenship if you want to get your citizenship elsewhere. The only requirement is that when you enter the country and when you leave the country, you use your U.S. passport. And there's a good chance your country, the other country you're a citizen of, has that same type of requirement. But there are countries, I know Indonesia's one, that if they find out you got citizenship in another country, you're going to lose your citizenship. So that's one of the biggest reasons people don't want to naturalize sometimes. They don't want to give up a citizenship, or whether it's they think they have to, or like I said, there are plenty of countries that will make you if they find out. So that is something you want to check up on. But if you're a U.S. citizen and you're a citizen of any other country, that is not a problem. Any more questions that you guys have? We'll stay on here for a couple more minutes to see. Aaron, do we have any good stories about naturalization?
Good ones.
Good ones.
What are you thinking of?
The
guy who got his green card with a fiance visa, or We had a guy years ago who got a green card based on a marriage less than 2 years old, 751, and apparently he separated from the wife between the time of the interview and the time of the approval of the decision.
But he waited 5 years, but even so. Oh, no, I mean, the 751.
Yeah. So then thereafter he naturalized and it was approved. And then he showed up for the day of his interview, for his naturalization ceremony day, and he got pulled out of line and they told him that they found that he had divorced his ex-wife after the interview, but before the decision approving the 751, giving him the permanent green card, 10-year green card. Therefore, he committed fraud. His naturalization was denied, and he was put into removal proceedings. We were able to fix it ultimately by doing a new 751 and proving the marriage was real, but that there was we either did it based on the divorce or the abuse. I think we did a divorce and we used abuse. I wanted to show that it was real and that it was a nasty situation.
I talked about this case a few days ago, and we actually had to amend the judgment of divorce because the wife had said that he abandoned her 3 weeks after the marriage, which was years. They were still living together when she served him with the divorce. That wasn't true. But immigration saw that, and they're like, what the hell? And basically, you're not a citizen until you take your oath of allegiance. So they actually literally took him out of the line. Like, they knew he was coming for the oath. And that's when they got him and put him in removal proceedings. He's a citizen now, but it took a lot of work to get him there. And speaking of which, there are two other topics I don't have on the list that I want to mention just real quick. One is denaturalization proceedings. Those are incredibly rare, even today. That's basically losing your citizenship. The only way for you to lose your citizenship is if you are sued by the government in federal court. And it is rare because of how expensive it is and how hard it is to prove. It's generally going to deal with fraud if they're going to do it at all. You don't need a criminal conviction, but that would help the government at least. So another way is like if you're, no, not asylum. Yeah, I mean, they're just very rare. And the other thing I wanted to mention is one of my least favorite topics, which is what do you do when your application is taking too long? And there is, with naturalization, something that you could do for other things too, called a writ of mandamus. We've talked about this in other lives as well, but essentially you're suing the federal government in federal court for taking too long in your application, because the immigration law gives the government a certain period of time to decide your naturalization. Like, you shouldn't have to wait forever. It's not fair. It's not right. And that's why our friend who asked earlier about the interview, he would probably already be in a position to be like, you know, pushing the buttons on the government to schedule his interview or threaten the lawsuit. There's a certain period of time after you file, and then a certain period of time after the interview that they have to make a decision. You can't just go and sue them that quickly. It's not like that. You got to go through all these steps first. You have to, try to get it resolved before turning to the courts. But it is an option, and it is a very effective option when you have to turn to it. It's not a cheap option, but the last one that we filed, the next day they scheduled our client's interview. So it works in that regard. But it is at the last option out of a whole list of options that it's called exhausting your administrative remedies. You have to show the court, look, I called the 800 number. I filed an online request. I filed an ombudsman request. I contacted my congressman, and I still am waiting, and I still don't have an answer. And at that point, that's when it's right for you to have the court step in. So if there are no more questions at this time, we want to thank everyone for joining us. We will be back in a few weeks. We haven't picked our new topic yet. We're open to suggestions for our next Q&A. And this Monday at 9 p.m., I will be doing a live with attorney Hashi Richards on marriage and the immigration law. We're going to just have a nice conversation, answer some questions about what marriages look like and how the government views it and what you do to prove you have a real marriage, and go from there. And then on this Thursday at 3 p.m., we will be debuting a new series called Lawyers Without Filters. It will be myself and 5 other attorneys and our special guest, our expert for the day, Clementine Deseu, who is a model and co-founder of All Women's Project. She's our social media and image expert. The first episode on that will be on image. So we invite you all to join us, set your reminders, like us and follow us on Facebook and the YouTube and the Twitter and all that lovely stuff so that you don't miss any more. Thank you all for watching and asking your questions. If you need us, again, contact info on the bottom. We're here to help you. Enjoy your evening, and we will see you all very soon.
Good night, everybody.